From a scared 12-year-old boy to that same boy using powers to save everyone he loves, here's the complete story of why Stranger Things absolutely is not over, why the Mind Flayer is definitely still alive, and why Will Byers might be the key to everything that comes next. Look, I know what you're thinking. Joyce literally decapitated Vecna with an axe, the Upside Down collapsed. The bridge is gone. 11 seemingly sacrificed herself standing at that gate while everyone screamed in slow motion. Credits roll, time jump happens, and we get this beautiful, bittersweet epilogue where everyone's moved on with their lives. Steve's coaching Little League and teaching sex ed. It's over, right? Well, I'm going to explain exactly why it's not. Let's start with the stone. The briefcase scene in Henry's memory that Max and Holly stumbled into while escaping Camazotz. We watched a young Henry Creel, wounded from being shot in the hand by a dying scientist, open a mysterious briefcase. Inside was what dark piece of matter that begins leaking Mind Flayer particles the moment it's exposed to air. Those particles don't just float around aimlessly, though. They meld directly into Henry's wounded hand, and he gets this vision of the Mind Flayer in the abyss whispering, "Find me." Now here's where things get really interesting. The scientist who shot Henry was desperately trying to stop him from opening that case. He knew what was inside. He knew what it would do. The government, or at least some faction within it, knew about the Mind Flayer's existence before Henry ever opened the gate. They had a physical piece of it, contained in a briefcase, and they were terrified enough of what might happen if it got out that a man with half his head blown open still tried to prevent a kid from touching it. So where did that piece come from? How long had they had it? And is there more of it somewhere? Because here's the thing about exotic matter that Dustin explains in the later episodes. It's what holds the bridge between dimensions stable. The Upside Down isn't just some parallel dimension sitting there waiting to be accessed. It's literally a wormhole, a bridge connecting 2 points in space and time. The exotic matter is the structural integrity of that bridge. When Nancy shot the orb in the lab, it almost collapsed everything and killed them all. The only reason it stabilized was presumably because of the larger network of exotic matter that had been building in Hawkins since the gate first opened. But that piece of dark matter in Henry's hand came from somewhere before any of that. It came from a direct sample that existed independently of the Hawkins gates, which means there's a source, an origin point. And if there was one piece that could be contained in a briefcase and transported to Indiana, there could be others. There probably are others. The government doesn't collect just one sample of anything important. This matters because of what we learn about the relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer in the final battle. When Will is connected to the hive mind and trying to talk Henry down, he appeals to him by saying, young Henry was just a vessel, just like Will was. And Henry's response is absolutely crucial to understanding what's really going on here. He says he chose to join the Mind Flayer. He doesn't control it, and it doesn't control him. That's not a partnership of equals. That's not even really a partnership at all. That's a symbiotic relationship where both parties have their own agendas that happen to align. The Mind Flayer wanted access to our dimension. Henry wanted power and revenge and to remake reality in his image. They found each other useful, but the Mind Flayer existed before Henry found it. The Mind Flayer was reaching out, whispering, "Find me," through that piece of exotic matter, long before Henry Creel ever stepped foot in Hawkins National Laboratory. And when Vecna's lair unfurls into the full-sized Mind Flayer during the final battle, we see that the Mind Flayer is a physical entity. It's flesh and bone and structure. It's been building itself a body this whole time, using the connection to our world, using the children it's been feeding on, using Henry as its avatar and access point. Joyce kills Vecna by chopping his head off, and the Mind Flayer collapses, and everyone acts like the threat is over. But they killed the avatar. They killed the connection. They didn't kill the source. Go back to season 2 for a second. When Will is possessed by the Mind Flayer, Joyce and the others eventually manage to burn the particles out of him using heat. They close the gate at Hawkins' lab. Everyone celebrates. And then season 3 happens, and guess what? The Mind Flayer is back. It rebuilt itself from rats and people and basically anything organic it could find in Hawkins. It didn't need the gate to be open, it just needed there to have been a connection at some point. Particles that got through before the gate closed were enough for it to start rebuilding. Now let's talk about Will Byers and why his existence means this story absolutely cannot be over. Will explicitly tells his mother in season 5 that he's been connected to the hive mind ever since the Demogorgon grabbed him in 1983. Not just during the periods when he was actively possessed, but always. The connection was reactivated when the gate reopened at Starcourt in 1985, and again when he returned to Hawkins in 19X. Robin even makes the analogy that Will is like a radio receiver. When creatures from the Upside Down are nearby, he can tap into their thoughts and see through their eyes. But here's what really matters. When Will uses his powers against Vecna in that climactic moment at the Max Z, when he kills those Demogorgons by twisting their limbs like Vecna does to his victims, he's channeling the same power source that Vecna channels. And afterward, when Joyce asks if maybe he could use those powers against Vecna, the implication is clear. Will has access to something much bigger than just a psychic Wi-Fi signal. He has access to the same force that created Vecna in the first place. And at the end of the series, with the Upside Down collapsed and the bridge destroyed, Will is still alive. Will still has those powers. Will still has that connection. Because you can't sever a link to something by destroying the bridge when the link was established before the bridge existed in its current form. Henry's connection to the Mind Flayer came from that piece of exotic matter in the briefcase, not from the gate. Will's connection came from being dragged into the Upside Down and having tentacles shoved down his throat by a Demogorgon operating under Mind Flayer control. The source of the connection isn't the Hawkins gate. The source is the Mind Flayer itself. And the Mind Flayer exists in the Abyss, which Dustin explicitly tells us is separate from the Upside Down. The Upside Down is the bridge. The Abyss is where the creatures actually come from. Destroying the bridge doesn't destroy the Abyss, it just closes the path between here and there, for now. Now I want to address something that I've seen a lot of people saying since the finale aired, which is that killing Vecna should have killed the Mind Flayer too, since they were so deeply connected. And I get why people think that. The show definitely presents them as intertwined. Vecna's lair is the Mind Flayer. When Vecna dies, the Mind Flayer collapses. Seems pretty definitive, but go back and look at the exact phrasing the show uses. Henry says he chose to join the Mind Flayer. He doesn't control it, and it doesn't control him. That's not describing a situation where one entity's death would automatically destroy the other. That's describing a symbiotic relationship where both parties remain fundamentally separate even while working together. Think of it like this: if you have a tapeworm dies, you don't die too. You just stop having a tapeworm. The relationship goes one direction. The Mind Flayer benefits from having Henry as its avatar in our dimension, but the Mind Flayer's existence isn't dependent on Henry the same way Henry's powers became dependent on the Mind Flayer. When we see the Mind Flayer collapse after Vecna's death, what we're really seeing is the physical manifestation of the Mind Flayer in the Upside Down losing its coherence. It's the body falling apart because the animating force has been cut off. But the animating force itself, the entity in the Abyss that whispered, "Find me," through that briefcase decades ago, that thing still exists. It's just sleeping, or waiting, or looking for a new way in. We still don't really understand what the Mind Flayer wants beyond general conquest and consumption. We don't know where it came from, or how long it's existed, or if there are other entities like it in other dimensions. We don't know if it has a consciousness that thinks and plans the way humans do, or if it's more like a force of nature that simply does what its nature compels it to do. And we definitely don't know if destroying it is even possible. Let's talk about how Henry could theoretically invade Earth again, because the show has actually given us all the pieces to figure this out. Dr. K's whole arc in Season 5 is about restarting Martin Brenner's experiments. She was collecting Kaylee's blood specifically because Kaylee has powers similar to Eleven's, and she was trying to create new psychic children by infusing pregnant women with that blood. This is the exact same thing Brenner did with Henry's blood and Terry Ives. The program never stopped. It went underground and kept going even after Brenner died. If Kay knew about this, she almost certainly knew about the exotic matter too. She knew about the Abyss. She was operating a base inside the Upside Down. Her knowledge base extended way beyond just catch 11 and study her powers. She understood the dimensional mechanics at play here, and when the Upside Down collapsed, Kay was left standing at the Max Z watching her operation fall apart. But she wasn't captured. She wasn't killed. She just watched the truck descend into the portal, and then she was left there with all her knowledge and all her resources and all her determination to restart the program. Now imagine this scenario. Kay or someone like her discovers another piece of that exotic matter somewhere in government storage. They don't need to open a gate to the Upside Down. They just need to create a new connection to the Mind Flayer, the same way it happened originally with Henry. Find a psychic child, or create one using Eleven's or Kali's blood, and expose them to the exotic matter. The Mind Flayer is still out there in the Abyss, It's still conscious, it's still hungry, and it's probably extremely angry about what happened to its avatar. All it needs is a new vessel. Remember when Dustin is explaining the dimensional mechanics to everyone at the radio station? He draws that diagram showing the Upside Down as a bridge between our world and the Abyss. The Upside Down is frozen in time at November 1983 because that's when the connection was established. It's a snapshot of Hawkins at the moment the first gate opened. But here's what's weird about that. Henry's connection to the Mind Flayer predates 1983. It happened when he was a kid in the 1950s. So there was already a link between our dimension and the Abyss before 11 ever contacted the Demogorgon. Henry was the original bridge. His body, infused with that exotic matter, served as a living connection to the Mind Flayer for decades before the Hawkins Gate existed, which means the Upside Down as we know it isn't the only possible configuration of interdimensional space. It's just the one that got locked in when 11 opened the gate. There could be other versions, other bridges, other access, points that don't look anything like the Hawkins we know. The scientist with the briefcase knew about the exotic matter before Henry was even born. Someone was studying this stuff. Someone was collecting samples. Someone understood enough about interdimensional physics to know that this piece of dark matter was dangerous and needed to be contained. All of that happened before Henry, before 11, before any of the gates we see in the show. So what happened to all that research? All those samples? All the people who were working on this before Brenner ever got involved? The show never tells us, and I think that's deliberate. Let's talk about that ending for a second, because there's something really important in Mike's final speech to his friends. Mike doesn't know for certain that 11 is alive. He explicitly says he doesn't know if his theory is true, but he chooses to believe it anyway, and his friends choose to believe it with him. They choose to believe that Kali projected an illusion of 11 at the gate while the real 11 escaped somewhere safe. And then we get that shot of 11 hiking toward those 3 waterfalls she dreamed about. Now here's what's interesting about that. The show doesn't confirm or deny whether this is real. It could be 11's actual fate. It could be a visualization of what Mike hopes happened. It could be a dream or a memory or a glimpse of some possible future. The Duffer Brothers are famously precise with their storytelling. They don't include ambiguous shots like that by accident. If they wanted to definitively show that 11 survived, they could have just had her pop up at the D&D game. If they wanted to definitively show that she died, they could have just not included that final shot at all. Instead, they gave us something in between, and that door being open matters enormously for any future installment, because 11 is the only person with enough raw psychic power to potentially match what the Mind Flayer is capable of. She's the one who originally made contact with the Demogorgon and opened the gate. She's the one who closed the gate at the end of Season 2. She's the one who consistently poses the biggest threat to Vecna's plans throughout the entire series. If 11 is alive, and if the Mind Flayer is still conscious somewhere in the Abyss, then we have all the pieces in place for a future confrontation. 11 on one side, the Mind Flayer on the other, and Will caught in the middle as the only person who's been connected to both. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The only question is when and how the next chapter begins.